Okay, well, I'm Paddy Nason. I'm getting on a bit now, but I'm talking about something that happened to me when I was 17 or 18. I'd not long come out of hospital after having TB. I had quite a long time doing nothing. And I was called up for the army, and after serving the preliminary training in North Wales, I was sent to the Amphibious Warfare Centre in Devon to train with the Navy, though I was Army. I was trained as a wireless operator. Our job was to direct the ship's guns in a battle, if there was such a thing. And I eventually took my motorbike back down there. I had no interest in religion or God, though I did think there was something there, but that was all. So I eventually, it was 333 miles from Harwich, where I lived, to the Amphibious Warfare Centre in Devon, and I took leave sometime and hitchhiked home and went back on the motorbike. After a time, we had the chance to have a few days off. So I had a mate of mine who lived only about 20 miles from where I did. I decided to take him home. So we got on the bike and we got up to near Bath. The main road from Bath to London in those days, this was about 1955 or 6, was a 3-lane highway, most dangerous roads in the world, because there was no passing lanes as such. You had 3 lanes. You drove on the left, of course, in England, but you used the centre lane for overtaking in either directions without any direction from which piece can go. And there were very high-speed vehicles around in those days too, very, very powerful cars. There was no speed limit apart from in town, which was 30 miles an hour. So we got on to the Bath to London Road, going down there quite happily at 70 miles an hour, not kilometres, miles, and very, very little traffic. And way ahead of us at one stage, the only vehicle on the road apart from us was a baby Austin 7, which was right down in the left-hand gutter with his trafficator stuck out on the right. Those things were always getting stuck, so he didn't take too much notice. And if he was turning right, he should have been in the centre lane, not in the gutter on the left. So I pulled out into the centre lane to overtake him, and having seen him way ahead of us to start with, and just suddenly he turned right across the front of us. So it was far too late to brake. I tried to swing left to go behind him, and he stopped. I hit him head on. So I tried to pull to the right as hard as I could in the hope that he would realise we were there and stop. But he still kept coming, and we went further and further to the right until we were actually entering the road that he was going into. And the last thing I remember there was a steel post or a post of some sort right in front of us. We didn't even have crash helmets in those days, we were just in army uniform. And the car was right up against us on the left. Well, this is it, we've had it. And the next thing I knew, we were back on the left-hand side of the road, still doing 60 or 70 miles an hour. And I just couldn't believe it. I looked back behind me, and the Austin 7 was rocking backwards and forwards in a cloud of smoke. So we went on a mile or two before the shock set in and I had to stop. And I said to my mate, did that car actually hit us? I thought perhaps he'd hit the back of us and twisted us round, which would have been hopeless anyway. But no, he said, I don't think it touched me. He said, it came up right to my leg. He said, I don't think it touched me. And we had no marks on the bike, no marks on us, and no recollection of either of us of what had happened from the time we were about to die to the time we were back on the left-hand side of the road. It was quite incredible. So looking back now, I think the only explanation was God grabbed hold of us and put us back. The interesting thing was, I don't very often tell this story because I think the interesting thing was that about a year ago, I actually took this service at the Outlook in Boona, and I told this event the people there. And I don't usually talk about it because most people would never believe you anyway. So the interesting thing was that the following week, we went to the Desert Church, and there was a retired Irish minister there, and he gave the children's story. And the first thing he said was, I've had 7 motorbikes, and 2 of them have tried to kill me. So I'm listening to what he's saying to the kids. And he said, one of them, he said, I was riding along. He said, got to a series of bends. He said, I changed down, opened the throttle, got into the first corner. He said, and hit a patch of oil or something. He said, and the bike took off, slid across the road, the other side. And he said, the next minute I realised that there was a truck coming the other way and I'm going to go under it. So I forget exactly what he said, but he called for God's help, I think, what he was saying. And he said the next thing he knew, he was back on the left-hand side of the road, not a scratch on the bike, and perfectly okay. And I said to him when he came out, I said, I really want to speak to you. I said, it's very important. What did you know from the time you slid under or was going to slid under the vehicle and the time you got back on the left-hand side? He said, I know nothing at all about it. That's exactly my experience. And I told him what happened to me. And it was just incredible that should come up the week after I'd been speaking about it in Boona. And I think this is how God works. Yes, if I didn't mention my name, I'm Paddy Nason, and I knew nothing about God really. I knew a lot of people who claimed to be Christians, especially one I used to work for in England, and he was the biggest thief I think I'd ever met in my life. Wasn't a very nice person at all. And he said to me, what are you? I said, well, the best, I'm an agnostic. I said, what are you? He said, I'm a Christian. I said, well, what do you do about that? He said, I don't have to do anything about it. He said, but what are you doing about being agnostic? So I thought it was rather funny. But he was not a nice person, I can tell you, not as far as thieving was concerned. He nearly tried to get me involved at one stage, and somebody tipped me off to what was going on before I really knew just how bad he was. But yes, what was I going to say? Yes, here we moved to New Zealand in 1970, moved to Australia in 1980 and started a business. Still knew very little about God. Actually, in New Zealand, we lived about 200 metres from a Seventh-day Adventist church, which we have visited twice since we've been in Australia. But just before we moved to our present place, we were in Boona until 1990. And just before we left, we had leaflets come round. Pastor David Lawson was taking a series of programs in Ipswich with 9 projectors, and this was mainly on what was not prophecies. I can't remember exactly what it was supposedly about, but it was mostly archaeology. Archaeology, that's right, it was on archaeology. So we went to the first one. It was very, very interesting. We had some other friends with us that weren't interested. But I remember the second time we were going, my wife turned to me on the way there and she said, Paddy, you realise this is about religion, don't you? And I said, yes, I'm not silly. I know it's about religion. I said, but the rest of it is so interesting, I'll keep going. And we actually went to virtually every one there was, and we got a great big Bible from it because we'd gone so often. So An interesting thing was, although there were a lot of people there and David Lawson's way up in Brisbane, we were living in the shed. After the first one, we moved where we are now. We were living in a shed in Calbar while we got the house, got the house plans done and built the house. And David came out every other week from Brisbane to visit us in the shed, which was very good of him. I gave him a hard time. And he got quite cross one day, and he said, why don't you stop asking all these questions? I was asking a lot of questions about it, and I said, look, till I get all these things out of the way, it was job done, and he accepted that. And of course, we realised that what he was telling us was absolute truth. But it took me 6 years to get baptised until I was utterly certain that this was true, and of course, ended up becoming the head elder of the church, and my son-in-law at the time became the head elder of the one in Ipswich, which still is. And yes, it was quite interesting. But another thing that might be interesting, when we moved to this property, there's an acre and a half here.
How old were you when you got born again? Or came to the Lord?
I'd have to work that out, I'm not sure. That was 96. I'm almost 87 now, so quite a while ago. But we moved to this property, as I say, and I had an earth-moving business, 2 bulldozers and a couple of rots and a lot of explosive work as well. And we developed this ground, and the first thing I did was put trees in, put an orchard in, and we hadn't got water. And I said to my brother, who had a backhoe, I said, I'm pretty sure there's water down the bottom, one particular spot. And I said, if I could get down 20 feet, I think I'd get it. So I could push out 5 or 6 feet with the bulldozer, and you could, if it wasn't for the fact that it's solid rock, you could dug the rest with your backhoe. So I reckon we'd get water at 20 feet. Anyway, we had to get that idea because we couldn't do that in rock. But some years later, a chap came, Murph Woods, brought his drilling rig in next to us to drill for water. And I said, Murph, will you come and drill a hole for me? He says, yes. I said, well, I only want to go down 30 or 40 feet. And he said, oh, I don't have to go down a couple of hundred. I said, well, I can't afford that. I said, well, just put it down there. Anyway, I put a 2-litre bottle of water, because we still had a bit of a hedge along there then, put it down where I thought the water was. And he came a couple of weeks later and he said, where do you want the water, Paddy? I said, well, I'd like to have it up near the shed and I can put an electric pump on. And he went all round up here with his rods and, nothing here, nothing here. And I never said a word to him. And eventually he walked down the boundary and he got the exact spot where I'd had that bottle of water. And he said, your water's here. And I said, well, you see that bottle of water in the bush there? I said, that was standing on that exact spot until I came around with the ride on and it was in the way and I threw it out the way. And he said, oh, I will drill there. So he came in the next week, 20 feet, he hit water. Water was gushing everywhere. And I said to him, well, put it down to 40 to be on the safe side, which he did. And he had it tested and apparently we got some of the best water in the place and I can pump it night and day and it won't run dry.
Wow.
So, and how did I know it was there?
Inspired.
I think God told me where it was.
God blessed you with water and beautiful drinkable water.
Yeah. Well, it has a slight bit of salt, but all water around here has got salt, but this is one of the best you ever found. So it was very, very good, thank God. But we've had so many things. At one time, Lady Doreen